My name is Rhea Mahanta, and I'm a United Nations volunteer serving at the UN mission in South Sudan. I'm in a field office called BOR, which is in Jonglei state of South Sudan. As you can see behind me, the UN staff live in metal containers. I think it can be perceived to be challenging at first, but living in a setting where you also interact with communities on a daily basis and look at life from their perspective and the amenities and facilities available to them, I would still consider myself very lucky. I work in Civil Affairs Division, which is one of the key civilian components of the mission, and under a protection of civilian mandate. My role is to facilitate and promote conflict management, reconciliation, and social cohesion between communities. And I also support in implementing South Sudan's revitalized peace agreement to promote ownership of the peace process at the national, subnational, and local levels. I was born in a town called Guwahati in northeast India, and I started volunteering from a young age. So I was a teacher at a school for slum children. I worked with underprivileged communities to provide services, be it educational or documenting the human rights situation in Northeast India, or even helping out in public health, and volunteered anywhere I could to understand social issues at large. Because Northeast India was a conflict-prone region, and there was a lot of violent extremism that I witnessed growing up. So before strategizing and deciding what role I wanted to play in addressing these issues, I really wanted to learn about what is it that comprises of all these multitude issues. And this is why I started with volunteering. And when I was 21, I started working extensively with refugee populations through grassroots organizations, and then through the UN Refugee Agency, and even independently as a researcher. And I was dealing with refugees on a case-by-case basis, especially with Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, who are the most persecuted minority in the world. And that experience really had a personal impact on me, because one would hear all about on the news about the Rohingya crisis, the Syrian refugee crisis, the Yemen crisis, and hear all these stories of pain, loss, and destruction on one hand, and on the other, the indomitable human spirit that led these populations to overcome life-threatening challenges and build their life from scratch again in a host country. So while I was moved by all this, I couldn't help but feel helpless in a way, because I was providing them with support services and protection services, but I still couldn't do anything to address the root cause of the problem that led them to flee their homes in the first place. It seemed like I was responding to a crisis, but not able to prevent it. So I decided that I would work in conflict resolution and conflict transformation that would help address the root causes of conflict and hopefully prevent some such situations from happening in the first place. So that's the story behind, the driving source of my passion. Although all the issues are equally pressing and interrelated, I do think there is an urgency for climate action on one hand, and simultaneously non-proliferation. Climate action because the climate change compounds all the other problems, urgent problems, from insecurity to conflict to human rights violations to humanitarian disasters, and vice versa, of course. And non-proliferation because this is a time when we do not need to invest in more weapons and nuclear arsenal, but in more strategies of peace. And I think that should be our focus as a global community. I really have to think to answer this question, because I think it's a very ambitious goal when I think about what I want to achieve in my lifetime. But in short, I think I want to empower people, communities, and parties in conflict to come to realize that conflict resolution and peaceful dialogue is the only way to transform any political, social, or economic situation. And we're facing a multitude of challenges at the same time, but the basic principle that is requisite to reconcile all our different positions and interests is to get to the underlying human needs. We need to deeply reflect on fundamental values of life, including equality, justice, and peace. And if our understanding of those concepts are different or competing, then it's conflict resolution and dialogue, which is the only way to come to a mutual understanding. And I want to promote a mindset shift of not me versus you, but us versus the problem. And that can have a significant outcome in helping transform relations in society. I have faith that humanity is capable of raising its conscience and coming together to understand the urgency of the issues at hand. But the catch is that we have very little time to steer the ship in a different direction. So yes, I do believe that we are capable of steering that ship. But the question is, will we do it within that narrow window of time, which is closing each day? And this will need a radical shift in our thinking and our institutional policies. I don't think we realize enough that we are in control. Governments are but a representation of their electorate and the nation comprising of the people. And corporations may not represent the will of the people, but they cannot survive without the consent and support of their consumers, donors, and buyers. So institutions and the people running them only have control if the general population allows it to. So I would actually encourage the people first to make their will known to our institutions. And if we don't like certain policies or products being put forward, then we have to engage our representatives or these corporations and let them know that we support or don't support their actions or inactions. And this engagement with institutions has to be a more common practice, which I see lacking. And to the people operating these institutions, I would urge them to listen to the will of the people, to really listen, because the tide is changing and we don't have much time before things go beyond our control with the threats posed by climate change, insecurity, conflict, and pandemics. So the need for upholding values like equality, human rights, peace, and environmental justice are no longer a choice, but a necessity. And if we all want to survive, and by we, I mean governments, corporations, TNCs, MNCs, communities, and all societies, irrespective of what nation or religion or ideology we come from, we need to realize that we're all on the same boat. We are human beings first and must stand together as one. And if our institutional and structural policies aren't changed to reflect these priorities, then we may as well relinquish all control over our survival as a species. I would say engage. Engage on social issues, engage with your representatives, engage with your decision makers to let them know what their citizenry think. And I think this is critical because governments, corporations, and institutions exist to serve people, but it is our responsibility to engage with them and make our views known and our voice heard. So engage on issues that affect your community and our society so that our representatives are aware of our needs and interests. So volunteer wherever you are. That's how I started. And there's so much to learn about our global society from different vantage points. So start with your vantage point. Start with wherever you are. And just opening that perspective to the world and shifting that mindset one individual at a time, I think will really help bring our global community together and create the unity that is required for us to acknowledge the bigger questions that lay ahead of us.